Welcome to Wire Guild. Hi, the tutorial that we're going to be doing today is a Art Deco style cube crystal bangle, and these are little cubes that we're going to be using. They're Swarovski crystal, they're 8mm, and they're just plain white with the AB coating on them. Obviously if you want to use colours or a different bead, absolutely fine. What I want to point out, this is the bangle we're going to be making, is the fit. Now with most bangles, you don't have to take into consideration your beads. Can you see how they poke inwards? Normally you would just measure the wire that goes around the edge, and that is the bit that determines whether it's going to fit or not. With this bangle you need to allow for the beads themselves as well, because they sit inwards and really that's what your wrist sits against. So thinking about the fit, each 8mm cube plus its binding measures ½ inch in length. You're going to need, excuse me, I'm full of cold, so I'm having to do this through a cold. You need about an extra ½ inch at the end of each with wire to create the holdings that hold the clasp on. Your clasp measures 1 inch, but then you lose ½ inch when you attach your clasp to the bangle. Because of this bangle having the beads that go inside the bangle where your wrist goes, it needs to be ½ inch larger than you would normally wear. So, for instance, my wrist measures 6½ inches. Normally I would wear a bangle that was 7 inch. However, for this bangle it has to be 7½. If you go to the end of the tutorial, there's more examples there at the end. I used 12 8mm cube beads, 7 pieces at 8 inch each of 21 gauge square, about 3 foot of the 18 gauge half round, and the 5½ inches of the 1mm wire that makes our clasp. So these are all the bits and pieces that we need to create our bracelet. That's the round wire for the clasp. I'm going to put that on one side, we don't need that right now. This is my half round 18 gauge binding wire. As you see, there isn't 3 foot there, but just using small bits. And I have 7 pieces of 21 gauge wire. We're using 7 because we need an odd number so that we've got a central wire to put our beads onto. So I'm gathering them up. As most of you will know, I don't like to use tape. I use my fingers and pliers. If you want to use tape, now is the time to use it. So I'm straightening my wires up, getting them nice and flat. There we go, just giving them a wriggle and making sure that the wires at the end are reasonably flat. I often put pliers over the top, it stops wires crossing because there's so little room. With your fingers have got a bit of give, but with pliers there is no room in there, so if you put your pliers over the top. So just making sure they're straight at the ends. Pop them straight, put pliers on, yeah. So let's bind them. So making sure that my flat side of the bindings is inward and the dome side is to the outside. I'm going to make sure that I put a nice sharp bend, nice stop. Without that, it's harder work for you. Make life easier. Put a nice sharp stop in. The end of the wire, I just, out of shot, just clip underneath my index finger, and then I wrap the wire around. Just get that straight. I'm not pressing down on the binding just there, I was pressing down on the 7 wires, and then tighten down. Because this is the end of the bracelet, we want it reasonably firm, so I would never advocate that you use sort of less than 3 bindings, but I think for the end of a bracelet, and especially one that's quite, you know, it's got a lot of presence as this bracelet, so I want a nice heavy binding on the end. So I'm going to go around quite a few times. Now as you noticed, each time I go around I'm pressing down, making sure my wires are flat, making sure they're nice and straight. There we go. Nice and flat and straight. At the end of the bracelet you need to leave a 1/4 inch of loose wire to attach our clasp to. So if I just mark that there with a pencil, as long as I don't wrap beyond that point, I'm alright. Because I've got 8 inches of wire, I've actually given myself probably about ½ inch too long anyway. This is so I've got a little bit of room to manoeuvre. and then I'm just pressing down as I go around. So wrap over, press down, wrap over, press down. If you press down every time with your pliers, it will stay lovely nice and flat, because you don't want a bunch of wires. We want a flat strip of metal. So there we go. I've gone around about 6 times there. I am just lift that, pull, tuck. That just means that if it's a little bit loose at that end, that first wrap we did, that's sorted out, and I'm going to cut the end off. I always cut off under halfway. It makes for a much neater cut off edge on the underside. And I'm going to do the same there. Less than halfway, cut off. If you want more detailed instructions on binding, I do have a skill set video just on binding where you can see in more detail. Now, as you can see, I am nowhere near that mark that I made that was my 1/4 of an inch. So I've got plenty of space there. Just flatten out. I do like to do a lot of flattening, don't I? Now, if you have plastic jawed pliers, you can use them and squeeze the bindings down with impunity, because of course you can't damage anything. However, if you don't have them, it doesn't matter. You can squash them down with the others perfectly fine. So I have 7 wires holding where my bindings are, so it's nice and supported. I am going to separate those out so that I have 3 on one side and 3 on the other, nice and gently, right up against the bindings, and I'm bringing those down. The reason I'm going gently is because I want them to stay in their existing line. I don't want, a bunch. It's a very geometric design, is this. It's very bold with straight lines, therefore the thing you're aiming for are straight lines. So I'm bending that until it's all the way back, so it's virtually flat. There we go. And you can see I've still got my central wire going up the middle, and that's ready now to take one of the cube beads, and I'm just going to pass that on. Lovely, and that will drop all the way to the bottom. Then I'm going to start now shape my wires up and around the side of the bead. 1 wire at a time is usually the easiest, so using your fingers, just pressed against the bead, and the second wire, and the third, making sure they don't cross over. Bring them together with your pliers. If it's easier, move the bead out of the way. It'll probably fall back on you, and then you can just make sure they're flat, and just put a bit of a sharper bend in there. There we go. Lovely. That's one side of our bead. So we do the other side. 1 wire at just turn this over. There we go. 1 wire at a time. Pushing the bead up as far as it will go. 1, 2, making sure that the wires are sitting side by side and not going over the top of each other. Alright, let's have a look. No, let's get that a bit tighter. So pliers in, grip, and just pull that corner. There we go. So that fits in neatly now. Right, our bind is going to go over the top, but can you see how that wire pulls in? If you bind like that, what will happen is it will pull the wires in. So there's a really easy trick to stop that happening, which is you just put a second bead on your wire, like that, and then you bind in between them. The second bead stops the wires being pulled in too much and keeps everything nice and neatly parallel. I have seen, can you see just there, we're going to bind in the middle bit. So binding wire, nice sharp bending, exactly the same as we did on the end, except this time we're going to go all the way over that gap. Hang on, sorry, it's caught. Undo it. There we go. Much better. Right then. Separate the 2 beads. Make sure the wires either side of our beads are flat, and we've got a hole in the middle. And then we put our wire over the top and bind all the way over. So we're going over the 3 wires on the left, the 3 wires on the right, and the gap in the middle. Pliers on, press it down. Just as important with this bit to press down every time as it was when we were doing the bindings on the end. Round again and press down. Let's just press down at the top as well. Lovely. Now bring it round again and press down. If you don't do anything else, as long as you press down every time, you'll find binding so much easier than trying to wrap it round freehand, because if you try and wrap it round freehand, it just automatically tries to go circular, and we don't want that. Now can you see that that one's a little bit sticky up? Release the back, pull it tighter, pull it down, and it gets rid of that little sticky up bit. Press it down again. So let's have a... Right, I've only got 3 bindings there, but I'm just getting them nice and pressed up. If you can't do it with your fingers, do it with your pliers like that. And then I'm going to go around for my 4th time, press down on the corner and bring it round to the back. Now when you're cutting off now, obviously we need to cut it off so it's hidden, so I'm cutting off at the back of those 3 edge sort of frame wires, if you like, and pressing it down onto that. If you cut it too long at this point, it will sort of stick out and it will show from the front. So cut it off nice and short and then press it down onto the frame. Lovely. Make sure it's nice and tied down, straighten everything up, push everything down. There we go, first binding on. So do exactly the same thing again. So put another bead on, get all my bits and pieces out of the way, find the central wire. I did have it a minute ago, there we go, and pop another bead on. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again. I put my next bead on, make sure that my outer wires are flat. As you can see, I'm holding the whole thing between my thumb and index finger, or well, I was before I started putting my nice sharp bend in my binding wire. Get hold of it again. Give myself a gap between the 2 beads. Put the binding wire on and wrap it around. I'm supporting the loose end with my index finger, that's why the whole thing doesn't just whiz around in a circle. And I've tightened down on both corners and I'm going around again. There we go, pliers on both edges, wrap around again, tighten down. There's 3 times, isn't it? Yeah. Flatten down. Pass it over. Right, this is the 4th time at the front. Do be aware of which is your front and which is your back. There's nothing worse than when you come right to the end and you suddenly realise that one of your wraps has been cut off at the front and all the others are cut off at the back. That's quite... look at that. So do be careful. So press that down onto the back. Lovely, nice and tight. And then tighten the wire that we started up with. You may have noticed that I always bind from left to right. I think it's because I'm right-handed. If you don't, that's perfectly alright. It's just the way I do it. So that's got me 2 wraps in place, and it's already feeling, and 3 beads, and it's already feeling much firmer, much more secure. So I'm going to do some more now, but we are just about now at the halfway point. So if you feel the need of a cup of coffee, maybe it's time for a break. So if you've had a break, welcome back. This is me now whizzing through the rest of the bindings. Exactly the same as we did before. I put a bend in the binding wire and then I wrap around 4 times, making sure that each time I tighten down on the corners each time they go around and trim off so that the ends don't show beyond the framework. I have seen bracelets like this done by other people, and what they've done is they've either started in the middle or they haven't put an extra bead on, and what they've been left with is a bracelet that, although reasonably attractive, doesn't have very, very strong straight lines. It tends to bow and come in between the beads in little bumps. But because this is an Art Deco design, a very geometric design, that's why we put the second bead in, because we want these very, very straight lines. It's nice to have something that's different, and most wire goes with the curves. This is all about the straightness. So here we go. I've got my full 12 beads on. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I've got all 12 beads in there in place, and each one of those has 4 binding wires in between. So we need to sort out the other end now. Obviously we can't do it the same way because we started at one end and worked this way. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to pull these wires around the bead and then use our pliers to grip the wire and bend it, grip it properly, that's it, bend it back up so that it's parallel to the wire that comes out of the centre of the bead. There we go. Like that. And as you see, I'm going over the top again. I go over the top so many times so that inside wire, bend it over the bead. Now if you use your finger, let me just show you what happens if you use your finger. Can you see how it's sort of too big? So it's much easier to use your pliers. You can use your fingers later on, but for those first 2 wires you need a nice crisp, you know, sort of neat round that bead look. So that's what we're going for. Now let's just bring the next wire in. So over the top. If you're having trouble with it and it slithers off the other one, you can put your pliers over the top like that and hold it and then bend it in with your finger. That makes sure that the wires lay side by side as opposed to crossing. So if that's nice and in, make sure it's flat to the other one. Then I can go over the top and I can bend it out so that it lays parallel with the other wires. Lovely. Now do the same again on the other side. Bring the second... Right, now what I've done is I've made a mistake. Instead of the first wire that I pulled in being the wire that was nearest the bead, I've actually pulled in the wire that was the second one. So I'm just going to have to rectify that. So I'm going to bend the wire. Hang on a minute. No. And just need to wriggle it through to the back. Just get that through there. Right, bend it over the bead. And then straighten. No, I haven't got enough room. So I'm just going to bend out that one that initially I bent. Like that. And then I've got room to get in. Then use my pliers and bend that wire up, and that will then become the one on the inside. There we go. You see, so even if you do something wrong, as long as you see it before you bind it, it really doesn't make a lot of difference because you can rectify these. Again, pliers over the top to make sure everything's flat. Open the pliers up, you could go over the edge. Sorry, I haven't got room with the camera. Let me just squeeze it in. That will start the movement going around the bead. Any way that you can get these wires to come in around the bead but lay side by side is fine. I keep saying there's no right and wrongs in wire jewellery making. As long as the finished product works, however you get there, it's fine. Now pliers over the top again to make sure it's flat. So I've just flipped the whole thing around so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm putting my pliers over the top while I'm just wriggling those 7 wires together. So holding the pliers with one hand, wriggling the wires so they're together. And once they're together, I can take my binding wire, go over the top, clip it underneath my index fingernail, and press it down. Because I tend to work from left to right, I'm working towards the beads. This is not an exact science. I don't know exactly where I need to start to get 6 bindings on. So that's 4. I'm probably not quite close enough, but I would rather sacrifice the odd wrap than neatness, and when I bind the other way I'm not neat. It's strange. So I've ended up going around there 7 times to get it close up. However, that doesn't matter, we can sort that out. Now then, let's just have a look at our measurements. Now I've got my 12 beads, which give me about 6-inch width of design. Then I've got my bindings, and then I've got 1/4 of an inch either side of the bindings. So I need to take that extra one off so it matches the other side. So I'm just going to unravel one binding from the other end. So then I have 6 bindings at both sides. You know, I mean, nobody would notice if you had 7 on one side and 6 on the other, but I think when you're selling things, you have to be a little bit more careful than when you're making them for yourself. When you're making them for yourself, you can sort of smile and say, well, you know. But I think when you're selling them, I always think that somebody's going to find out. Someone's going to say to me, look, you did this wrong. So just press the ends down and that side, and then I'm going to start and trim these ends down. So I need 1/4 of an inch beyond the bindings. So let me just, I hate this ruler. I'm going to have to find my metal one. It's kicking around somewhere. So from the bindings, 1/4 of an inch, and then you can either draw on it with a pencil if you have one, but I don't know what to do with mine. I'm going to put my snip straight over the top and press. Give it a squeeze. And what that does is it actually marks the metal with a fine line. And then I can take off one wire at a time. To prolong the life of your snips, you really should only be cutting one wire at a time. I do tell people this, and there are occasions when I don't do it, but it is better for your snips if you just do one wire at a time. So 1/4 of an inch. I know I didn't measure it, I can do it by eye, sorry, you measure it. And then take off one wire at a time. Okay, so that's basically our bracelet. We need to sort out our clasps now, so I'm going to grab all my bits and pieces and put them in the scrap pot and create our clasp. I have 2 pieces of wire, one's 2.5 inch and one is 2 inch. And I've taken the 2 inch piece and I'm going to bend it over. There we go. Until you've got a U shape. And then about halfway down the pliers, we need a loop that's large enough to take half of those width of wires in to attach the clasp to the bracelet. So we don't want it too tiny, we don't want it too big. So I'm about halfway down on my wubbers. Obviously if you've got very fine ones you'd need to be at the top. If you've got really thick ones you may need to be further down. So, and I've just created a loop and one at that side as well. And then because they're not touching, I put my, just tighten that one up a bit, pliers in and squeeze them together, and there we go. The eye from a hook and eye. Now then, we should have 2.5 inches here. And the easiest way to do this is if you actually measure the halfway point on your 2.5 inch of wire. Now I've actually got a little bit too much. I've got a bit over 2.5 inch, so I'm just going to straighten it up. Mark at 1.25. It's because I've just used a bit of scrap wire. I thought it was about the right length. So I'll have one end that's slightly longer than the other, but I'll trim that off. Put your pliers at the side of your pencil mark and just bend until you've got a nice corner bend. When you've got that, bring them together, put the pliers over the top and press them down, all the way down until the 2 wires are neatly folded. There we go. Sorry, the one wire is neatly folded. And then roll that with your round nose pliers. Great. So I said I had a little bit too much, didn't I? Let me just trim that off. Use them snips. Another bit for the scrap pot. Now, flat pliers, grip the hook end and then just bend one side and the other side into like a V shape. It makes like a little coat hanger. Grip in the same place on your pliers that we did before and roll that round till it touches. And do the same with the other side, all the way around. Now, if they cross over slightly like that, you can put your pliers in, put your flat pliers back over the top, just turn them round, sorry, and open them out. It just neatens it up. If they're not quite flat, if you've got, you know, higgledy-piggledy, pliers over the top and just neaten that. There we go, so it's all nice and flat. That's our hook and eye. Okay. So now we need to add our hook and eye to our bangle strap or our bracelet strap. So I'm going to use some snipe or some chain nose pliers when I can get hold of them. There we are. And I'm going to separate these wires on the end, one wire at a time. Now sometimes it can be a bit awkward to get hold of, but persevere. What we're aiming for is 2 groups of flat wire. I don't want a big splayed, you know, fan shape or anything like that. 2 nice neat blocks. Now because you've got an odd number of wires, obviously one side's going to have 3 wires and the other side's going to have 4. So just bring those down, bring them together. Lovely, take that one up. As you can see, all the time I'm neatening the wires up so that we've got 2 nice neat pieces. Yeah. Do the same on the other side, 1 wire at a time. Out we go. And that side. 2. Keep them together. If these are not kept together and you've got like a splay, it makes the next step virtually impossible to do. So, as with most things, it's preparation. If you get the preparation right, the next bit's not too bad. So, just keep those grouped together. There we are. That one's got 4 at the top, so I'm going to put 3 at the top. I would. There, 4. So we've got 4 there. It really doesn't matter which way around you do it. You could have 3 at one side and 3 at the other side and in matching pairs or vice versa. It doesn't make any difference. No one is going to notice. Now once you've got your 2 little clumps of wires, you get flat pliers, go straight to the top. That's the top, that's the bottom. Okay, so that's the top outside edge of the bracelet and I'm going to bend up to the top of the piece. Yeah, exactly the same on the other side. Bend up, top of the piece. Then using my round nose pliers, I'm going to grip the very edge of the wires and I'm going to curl those underneath. And a bit further. Don't make them touch. If they touch you can't get your hook and eye in. Just make little hook shapes. Now the other side, I always end up, one goes away from it and one comes towards me. I don't know why. Again, possibly something to do with being right-handed, that I automatically, as I turn the wire over, I do one further, one going and one coming. And do the same on the other side. And grip and bend. So I'm left with 4 little hooks, 2 on either end. Pop either your hook or your eye on, it really doesn't matter which side goes on which. And then using snipe or chain nose pliers, I go into the loop and ease those wires around. If you can imagine making a fist, your fingernails sort of go into the palm of your hand and it curls over. That's what I'm aiming to do. You're taking the end of those wires as if they were your fingernails, and you're curling it into a fist around the clasp that you're putting on. And the easiest way to do that is to poke that pliers through and smooth it down. There we go. Ease it over. You'll find that once you get the hang of doing this, it's a great way of adding clasps because you don't get any sharp bits at all. There's nothing there that could irritate or rub against your wrist. Now do exactly the same on the other end. So, snipe or chain those pliers in and push those end bits over, easing them into a circular shape. If they're not completely neat and they're sort of separating out, just go over the top and push them in. Push, push. That's it. It's quite an easy movement. Don't try and rush it by just doing one squidge, not like, ugh, there, it'll do. Just gentle movements with the wire over, and then you'll get this nice sort of neat sort of hook hanging onto your hook and eye. There we go. No sharp bits. Now, this is a very substantial bracelet, so you know bending it's going to be quite fun. So I have my wonderful high-tech jam jar, and I'm going to wrap it around the neck. There we go, all the way around. Now the minute, let's just get that edge going in. The minute I let go, you can see it's only bent it a little bit. It's hardly at all, because it's really bendy and springy. So I use something much smaller and start going round from the ends. This is just a small reel of fine wire that I use for weaving. Anything, neck of a bottle, anything like that will do. And when you've got an oval shape, fasten the bracelet together, 2 fingers inside, thumbs on the outside, pull out with your fingers and in with your thumb. And just keep doing that. You're better off doing this 20 times gently than you are doing once really rough and getting it wrong. So nice and gentle, ease it into shape. And there is one very pretty, very geometric Art Deco bangle, which, believe me, you wear that, everybody will comment on it. So next is some size variations that I've gone through. It's just a general guide. I'm sure that you'll be able to work out whichever size you want to make and how many cubes you're using and everything like that. I hope you enjoyed doing this bracelet. Happy wrapping!